What's going on, everybody? So today we're going to go over the new 3 Paragon trees and which one might actually be solid. Now, these ones are actually really interesting, and I think that there are some viable options for these. The only problem is I think that they're competing with a couple of other Paragon trees in their kind of niche, so that might be tricky because, as many of you know, I've pushed for Treasure Hunter since day one, and I believe that it is the best tree to run for PvE, even in dungeons potentially. However, I actually think that one of these Paragon trees can actually replace Treasure Hunter in a lot of scenarios. So let's talk about it all and give you my final thoughts. Let's get into it. All right, so we have the Massacre, the Brawler, and the Duelist trees. Now, the first thing I'll say about these trees is that you will actually be accessing more nodes. So, for example, the more damage nodes, and I'll have a full video describing my new strategy for these new nodes and the new Paragon trees, because there's actually a bunch of stats that you can acquire from these, regardless of how good the Paragon trees they are themselves. You can see here I have a lot of points allocated in some random slots, because, well, I was going for life because I could not get any more damage. So that's important to note right off the bat. Now, I have gone ahead and tested a few of these trees, but I've since kind of, bypassed them, kind of ignored them, because I personally prefer the other trees. But just talk a little bit about this. Massacre up first. This one is going to be purely for open world farming and potential dungeon farming, or like Elder Rift farming or Challenge Rift farming. So farming in general, but you need to be getting kill streaks, and that's the trick. So anything that's going to drop your kill streak is going to be a pretty mediocre tree. So if you're running in dungeons and you're not able to maintain a kill streak, let's say you're doing, I don't know, Cavern of Echoes, and you have to wait in between some sort of portion, like when the ice falls from the ceiling and you have to wait for the bridge to fall, you might drop your kill streak there. If you're doing, I don't know, Temple of Namari, and you're stuck between the boss fights, you'll drop your kill streak there, which means that this isn't viable in those dungeons. But talking about the basic skills here, the first one is aggression. During a kill streak, we're going to get every 10 kills grants us 3% primary attack speed up to 15%. Now I'm looking at this and I'm like, okay, this is great for Demon Hunter. Every other class is okay, but not nearly as good as something for the Demon Hunter, because Demon Hunter also has a really easy time keeping up kill streaks. Then we have the second skill, Boundless Strides. Now this one's very, very good, because you can see here during a kill streak, every 10 kills is going to grant us 3% increased movement speed. Once again, we're gonna have to continuously hit. This is actually solid. I think that Crusader could take a lot of advantage from this one. Demon Hunter could take a lot of advantage out of this one, and pretty much almost all the classes could. But for particular classes that have easier time keeping up kill streaks, this one is looking quite solid. Kill streak timer now expires 10% slower, and picking up items will refresh the kill streak duration. This is incredibly important because this is going to be one of the best ways to actually extend your kill streaks, especially in dungeons. And I think that this single ability here might make this viable for dungeons. And after my testing, running through the Mad Kings or things like that, where you're fighting a lot of monsters beforehand, you're going to be able to go ahead and actually take advantage of this. The only problem is that you have to kill quite a few creatures to get a value out of this. So oftentimes I only have like 20-30 kills to get my actual 9% bonuses versus the 15% of both these. Next one is the Tenacity. During a kill streak, we're going to get 10 kills. Every 10 kills is going to grant us 1% damage reduction up to a maximum of 5%. Once again, I don't really care about damage reduction or tankier stats for PvE. I care about damage increasing, and 5% isn't really a whole lot. Lastly, Combat Trance is going to be able to stack up to 30% for Boundless Strides and 10% for Tenacity. This isn't as good as you might think in a lot of content. Again, for Challenge Rifts, you're not really killing a whole lot. If you're pushing Challenge Rifts, which is again the context, you're not killing a whole lot and maintaining kill streaks all that often, because you're oftentimes running past enemies. Now you can actually kill, like just tag them and move forward, so this is potentially viable in there. But for Elder Rift, for open world farming, that's where you're really going to see it, because you're going to be able to go out and keep those kill streaks very high and get the max amount of kills that you need to get to the max numbers. And honestly, the movement speed is very nice for open world farming and is a consideration. Now you're also going to get the value, you can see here, this actually doesn't affect the aggression, so you're only going to get 15% in primary attack speed, but the movement speed is very nice for certain farming locations, especially solo ones, where you're going to want the extra movement speed to keep up your kill streaks. I actually think that this one in particular is going to make some farming locations more viable just to keep up the kill streaks. So that's super interesting for that purpose. But I do want to mention, if you're running this tree, you're not going to be running the increased loot, increased XP from Treasure Hunter, and I also think that's a major loss. So overall, I found that Massacre, not my cup of tea. I don't like this one. If I was running dungeons, I'd rather just run Zeal. Things like, extra attack speed for every monster I defeat for 6 seconds. The wrap, extra damage done, all that type of stuff. I'd rather run Vanquisher in dungeons over something like the kill streak one. And then for open world farming, I'd rather run Treasure Hunter. So, not a huge fan of Massacre. I like the idea, and I like that it has some viable options in some random farms, but I don't think it's good enough to warrant losing Treasure Hunter or Vanquisher. Brawler is the next one. It's going to be a defensive tree, and this one's going to be kind of for PvE. You can see reducing the loss of control by 20% from effects applied to you by elite monsters. I, again, don't really care about this because I don't really care about CC when I'm open world farming or doing dungeons or anything like that. Why? Because, well, I care about damage. That's really what this game is about. Speeding through dungeons, speeding through open world, speeding through that type of stuff. And so reducing the loss of duration of loss of control isn't really my cup of tea. Again, I'd rather just have increased damage. Close quarters, primary attacks that damage elite monsters within 2 yards grant you stacks of close quarters, reducing the damage taken by elite monsters. Well, elite monsters aren't super common, and so this doesn't even have some super viable options in some scenarios. Elite monsters die very quickly. I think this is pretty bad. Close quarters radius increased. Well, 3 yards isn't enough already for ranged classes. So ranged classes to me are absolutely completely out of the question for this tree. But even for melee classes, again, it's not really a whole lot of damage reduction for one, and two, it's for only elite monsters. Now we also have Rapid Remedy. While close quarters is active, dealing damage has a 10% chance to reset the cooldown of Healing Potion. Oh man, I don't even know when the last time I had to spam Healing Potions in PvE content. This one seems very useless to me, this skill. Bolster ranks. All party members within 20 yards benefit from your close quarters, reducing damage from elite monsters. Now this is where it gets a little interesting. You're like, okay, maybe I can go ahead and get that damage reduction and then extend it to my whole team. But if it's an elite monster and you're a ranged class, you're probably not going to be getting hit by it, for one. Two, the damage reduction isn't a whole lot. And three, it's only for elite monsters. I don't like this tree. I personally just don't like this tree at all. Again, some people might say, oh, but if you're free to play, you're going to take advantage of that damage reduction. It's going to be quite solid. Guys, even if you're free to play, which I've played a lot on some free to play accounts, even then, when you're running dungeons or when you're running open world, yes, you are very much more squishy. But this requires you to actually take damage, or rather deal damage with primary attacks within 2 yards, which basically means you're taking damage, because guess what? You have to be within 2 yards to basically get your reduction of damage. And then it's only 10% maximum. The only thing I could see this being potentially useful for is having one person run this and then extend it to your whole party. But I don't even like it then. Personally, this is my least favorite tree of the 3 new ones. Then we have the one that I think is the best one out of the new 3, and that is the Duelist tree, because guess what? We're going to get just flat damage increases. Using a skill while in combat increases the damage you deal to monsters by 1% for 10 seconds, up to 5 times. But all stacks are removed when we take damage. That's important because taking damage is very common. So this one isn't as easy to stack as it may seem. Deadly Intent, damage increased by 2%. Love this, 2% increased damage just permanently. Love it. This could even be used in PvP, because again, it doesn't say PvE specific. Next skill, when Bloodthirst or Fury are removed from taking damage, Fury is going to be up here. We're going to discharge lightning, damaging up to 5 targets within 5 yards. Pretty solid amount of damage coming out from this skill. But the Fury here, when we're using a skill in combat, our critical hit chance is going to be increased by 1% for 10 seconds. It stacks up to 5 times, and it's going to remove when we take damage. Last one, it stacks up to 10 times both Bloodthirst and Fury. Now, here's the thing. Static discharge, it's a decent amount of damage, but you don't ever want to have this discharge. You always want to have the 10% crit chance and the 10% increased damage, along with a 2% increased damage. Now, in PvP, I don't really like this one. Why? Because if you're a melee class, you're going to always take damage. If you're a ranged class, you're going to take damage from the wizards, the ranged classes, just randomly. Just random damage is going to come and hit you. So I don't necessarily like it there. And in PvE, can't run it on a melee class because guess what? You're going to take damage. So melee classes are out of the question for this one. But ranged classes, if you play well and you position yourself to where you're not going to take any damage, this one could honestly be the most viable tree for dungeon running. Not for open world farming, because again, you're going to run through them fast, you're going to run through the enemies, kill them, you're going to take a little bit of damage there. But for like boss fights, Duelist could actually be really, really good in dungeons because you'll oftentimes have a melee character that's going to tank the hits, and you just sit back and fire at them and get 10% increased crit chance, 10% increased damage, which is really, really powerful. And I really like this tree for PvE dungeons. So those are my overall thoughts here on these trees. Just to give you guys a TLDR here, Massacre, basically a kill streak farming tree, which I don't think is good enough to replace something like Zeal or Duelist for dungeons, and Treasure Hunter for open world farming. Brawler is a damage reduction for elites specifically, and CC reduction, things like that. Can extend to your whole team, but it's only for elites, and it's not a lot. I don't like damage reduction. I personally think this is a pretty poor tree. It's my least favorite. Honestly, probably of the entire trees, I hate Brawler. Duelist is potentially going to be the next best thing for PvE dungeon farming. I actually think it's going to be very, very viable in boss fights. Now, the only thing is, it could be decent in PvP, but only for ranged classes. This is basically only for ranged classes. Duelist really will not work on in melee classes because you're going to take damage too often to even get any of the effects. So those are going to be my final thoughts, guys. I think that the more viable option, to be honest, is to just continue running Treasure Hunter and continue running Gladiator. I think Cheat Death is just that good still for PvP, and I think Treasure Hunter is just that good for PvE open world, and I think Vanquisher is just a little bit better in dungeon farming. Maybe if you're a range class, you could try out some Duelist. I've already tried a little bit of Duelist, but to be honest, I didn't like it that much compared to just running Vanquisher. Why? Because I had to pay more attention. So that is something to keep in mind. I don't like paying attention, so I didn't like running Duelist. So there you go, guys. Let me know what you think. I think the more important thing is just to run for damage nodes, which I'll go over a video on that later on. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed, be sure to like the video, sub to the channel, and I'll see you all tomorrow.